We will be free! For when the rising tide is turned in every London quarter, Parliament comes crashing down with Robert's Rules of Order!
Okay, welcome everybody to the 4th of July special edition here of the Cult of RONR. Happy Independence Day, Treason Day, Insurrection Day, or whatever extremist anti-state message you wish to have. We have a kind of an interesting one here. Joining us is Mr. Richard Brown, who is the I guess you could describe him as the National Party parliamentarian. He's done several of our national conventions and some other stuff for us. Tremendous resource on this sort of thing.
And Ken's been retaining him for our meetings.
Yes, so he is very familiar with some of the goings on with the party and then some. A little background as to why Richard's here. There's been some dispute as to whether Mr. Melman is currently the actual LNC chair or whether he's an acting chair, depending upon how things are worded out. Mr. Brown, along with Mr. Balch and a few other people, have had the opinion that...
and me!
And the disembodied voice off screen here with the pink hair said that he became chair upon the resignation of Mr. Henchman. I disagree, because I think that the wording of the bylaws specifically say otherwise. So rather than have a proactive email argument and not getting anywhere, Richard asked to have a discussion with me about it, and rather than do it on the phone, we decided, let's see if we could do it this way. So here we are.
Yeah, so everyone can benefit.
So everyone can benefit from our back and forth. Now, I want to make something perfectly clear. I have mad respect for this man. Okay, he knows his stuff. There's no doubt about that, and I don't want anybody to assume that I'm saying otherwise, because I'm not. So, and Mr. Brown is a tremendous parliamentarian. He's got tremendous creds. We have quite a few of those around us, and I, for one, am grateful to have them around. So, and I know Caryn Ann is too.
Yep.
So,
and he's right on this thing.
We shall see. We shall see.
Absolutely, of course. You have a smart co-host there, Mike.
There's no doubt about that. There's no doubt about that. So here's the first. Do we have anybody here besides us at the moment?
Well, they're watching. There's just no comments. People feel free to comment.
Yeah, let us know you're here.
But I do see you on my little spy that lets me know at least how many people are watching. So yeah, there's a few diehards. I'm sure JJ's out there.
Yeah, if you're here, say something so we know you're here. So, okay. The way this all started, a little background for those who have been under a rock for the past couple of weeks, was that in the light of all the issues of Lettergate, New Hampshire Gate, whatever you want to call it.
Decorum Gate,
whatever. Insert gate here, whatever, swinging gate. Okay, so Terentia Flavia says hello. Hi. Because of what all happened, Joe Bishop Henchman, the previous LNC chair, resigned. Now, I'm not going to go into the whole details of that train wreck, because that's
plus, I'm sure Richard wants to stay neutral.
And that's not relevant to where we're going with this. That's a side tangent. I'm not going to go there. Maybe later, but not for this.
Yeah, we won't drag Richard into that.
Right. But folks, if I'm looking down, it's because the screen's here and the camera's up here. I got to get used to dealing with that.
Yeah, and comments are over there.
Right. So, it's camera presence, and I'm still getting used to that. In any case, so Mr. Melman, the vice chair, in his position, had to take over to run everything, which is expected. The question became, is Mr. Melman the acting chair, or does he automatically become the chair upon Mr. Henchman's resignation? Mr. Melman consulted with several parliamentarians, including Mr. Brown and Mr. Balch, and the conclusion that they reached was that there was an automatic ascension to the chair by Mr. Melman. I disagree, because I claim the bylaws say differently, and that the Robert's Rules cited don't say what people are thinking they're saying, which has led us to this discussion where we are here. So that's the long form. I'm going to let Mr. Brown give that argument first.
I'll give that a shot. Thank you, Mr. Seebeck. But that really is the issue. And a lot of people say there's a conflict between what the bylaws say and what Robert's Rules says.
Quick, pardon the interruption real fast. Did I summarize it well?
I think you did, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Go ahead. Thank you. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything for people,
Yeah, the issue is whether the vice chair, Ken Melman, automatically became chair upon the resignation of Joe Bishop Henchman. Mm-hmm. And according to the LP bylaws, when there's a vacancy among any of the four officers, chair, vice chair, secretary, treasurer, and your bylaws define, I think in Article 6, Section 1, who the officers are.
Right.
And then further down, I think in Article 6, Section 7 or 8, it says that if there's a vacancy among the officers, that the LNC shall fill the vacancies.
Right.
Well, that sounds fine. However, Robert's Rules, which the LP has adopted as its parliamentary authority, and when you adopt a parliamentary authority, you adopt, not just the rules Senate, the interpretation Senate, you agree to be bound by its interpretations. It's like adopting an 800-page contract. Robert's Rules has a provision in more than one place, several provisions, that say in the event of a vacancy in the office of the president, and the chair is equivalent. There's no doubt that right. Whether you call it president, chair, grandmaster, whatever, he's the head honcho.
Grand Poobah.
The Grand Poobah, exactly. That in the event of a vacancy in the office of the Grand Poobah, that the Vice Grand Poobah, Vice Poobah, automatically becomes Poobah instantaneously. And Robert's Rules, which is the official citation, is RONR, stands for Rules of Order Newly Revised. Don't ask me why they decided years ago that's the proper citation for it, but you hear parliamentarians refer to RONR, and that's referring to the latest edition of Robert's Rules of Order.
They probably got sick of putting the two R's together.
I know you would think they would, but they don't, and never have. In fact, when it was Robert's Rules of Order Revised, the abbreviation was ROR, for Rules of Order Revised. But anyway,
acronyms.
Robert's Rules is very clear in two specific places that the vice president automatically becomes president unless there is a specific provision in the bylaws that refers specifically, explicitly, particularly, it uses the word particularly, to the office of president. That if you have a general provision, as the LP bylaws do, which says in the event of a vacancy among the officers, the LNC shall fill the vacancies. According, that's all right. We enjoyed seeing you on fire, Caryn Ann.
No, it was just your sleeve.
or was that Mike going to? I mean, or was that?
It was Caryn Ann adjusting something by the camera.
Never mind. Okay.
Because I can't sit still.
Thought maybe that was somebody going to close the door.
No.
No, I'm rearranging the studio while you guys are talking because I can't sit still.
Okay.
Wayne closed the door a long time ago.
Yeah, okay. RONR is very clear in two separate sections that the body can prescribe how other vacancies are filled just with a provision in the bylaws. That's no problem. But if you want a different provision in the office of president, if you don't want the vice president or vice chair or vice poobah to become president automatically, you have to say so clearly and explicitly and make particular reference to the office of president. It is not sufficient to just say, if there's a vacancy among the officers, the LNC can fill the vacancies. That doesn't cut it. Robert's Rules is very clear. You have to have language that applies specifically to the president. The LP bylaws don't say that. There's no conflict between the Libertarian Party bylaws and Robert's rules. Robert's rules is very clear. You can have whatever method of filling vacancies you want. You can do it by lottery. You can do it by roll of the dice. You can refer to some other group to select your president. You can do anything you want to, but you've got to refer to it in a certain way in order for it to be valid. And the LP bylaws don't refer to it in that special way. And that's Jonathan Jacobs, JJ, who I hope is listening. In fact, I was hoping he would be able to participate, and maybe next time you can have him on. He wrote an article in one of the parliamentary journals about the rule shift function of not just Robert's rules, but of almost all the parliamentary authorities, where they have provisions such as this. And they tell organizations that you can do something differently from what we say, but you have to go about it in a certain way.
He
And
sent
that's
that
the same
over to
thing
us. We
here.
haven't read it yet.
Yeah, we were gonna probably go over that in an episode.
Yeah.
That article.
We haven't read it yet though, but he did send it to us.
So the bottom line is there's not really a direct conflict between Robert's rules and the LP bylaws. The LP bylaws just don't use the language that must be used to make that provision effective. And that is the opinion not just of myself. I'm a registered parliamentarian. I'm not a PRP. I'm a registered parliamentarian, RP, and of Jonathan Jacobs, JJ, who is a PRP, who's highly well respected, has written many articles in parliamentary journals, and also people like Bert Balch, who is one of the co-authors of Robert's Rules, and several other PRPs. I know of several. I'm going to refer to registered parliamentarians and professional registered parliamentarians all as credentialed parliamentarians. There's another national organization, the American Institute of Parliamentarians. They use a slightly different terminology, but in order to attain that level, you have to go through a credentialing process. You got to prove you know what you're doing. Among all of the credentialed parliamentarians who have looked at this, either specifically in the case of the LP bylaws or generally in the case of other bylaws that are written similarly, they all say the same thing, that you must refer specifically to a vacancy in the office of presidency in order to override the provision in Roberts. And I've lost count of how many, but there are several credentialed parliamentarians who have looked specifically at the LP bylaws, myself, JJ, Bert Balch, Joshua Katz, who's a registered parliamentarian, former member of the LNC, Scott Lieberman, the doctor who's in California, who's a member of the party, and I think on the California State Central Committee.
Richard,
he's a registered parliamentarian.
Do you know if Alicia looked at it?
I think that's Alicia's opinion as well. I know that it's Aaron Starr's position. I've actually discussed it with Aaron. I believe that's Alicia's position as well. I've even talked to Frank Robinson. I understood Frank Robinson, one of the party's founders, actually wrote the bylaws. So I called him, and that's his understanding.
That is correct because, pardon the interruption, but that is correct because the wording that we're talking about in the bylaws do go back to the 1974 version. So
yeah. Now, so that's probably 6 or 8 or 10 credentialed parliamentarians, either within the party or who have looked at the party bylaws, who all agree. There are another 6 or 8 or 10 on the Robert's Rules of Order forum, the discussion forum, who have looked at this exact issue with organizations that have almost identical wording. They all say the same thing, including Dan Hahnemann, who's on the authorship team. I believe Shmuel Gerber, who is on the authorship team. Others who are the most respected parliamentarians in the discussion group, like Josh Martin. All of us, everybody who has looked at it takes the same position. I'm not aware of a single credentialed parliamentarian anywhere who disagrees, and that's probably about 20 of us. And in fact, I think, Mike, you are the only person I know of with a significant amount of parliamentary knowledge who disagrees.
Wouldn't be the
but
first time I've gone against the grain.
but listen, I've
Ask Caryn
you know,
Ann.
the lone wolf can sometimes be right. That's why I wanted to discuss it with you. Was hoping we could have a phone call. I'm open to looking at it other ways, but in a nutshell, the problem is that the LP bylaws don't use the language that Robert says you have to use to get out from under the default provision. And that language was in effect in the edition that was in effect when the LP bylaws were drafted. It's not a brand new position. I think that was the 7th edition, published in 1970. That's the edition that was in effect when Frank Robinson drafted the bylaws. And he told me he was aware of that provision and figured that there was no need to go into detail because he knew Robert's rules covered it.
Okay. The bylaws do specifically say that, yes, that the chair is an officer. That's Article 6, Section 1. We agree on that. Article 6, Section 8, and Article 7, Section 7 both say, it's in two places because one's for the officers, one's for the LNC, that, and remember, in fact, the wording is almost identical, but not quite. They both say that the National Committee shall appoint new officers if vacancies occur. The LNC one also says and at-large members. That's the only difference. With such officers to complete the term of the office vacated. Except for that at-large piece, for the other piece, it's identical. No arguments there. Article 6, Section 4 specifically says that on the vice chair. The vice chair shall be the chief assistant. I'm reading off a paper here, folks. This is why I'm kind of looking down. Shall be chief assistant to the chair, performing such duties as the chair shall prescribe, and holding such executive powers as the chair shall delegate. Here's the key point. And shall perform the duties of the chair in the event that the chair is, for any reason, unable to perform the duties of the office. The key point there is that he's performing the duties. He is not assuming the title. There's a separation of the duties from the title there. You could call it a portfolio without minister if you'd like. And that's the only place in the bylaws where this shows up for this specific case. Other positions, secretary, treasurer, etc., if they step down, the duties are on the shelf until a replacement is made. That's normal. That's accepted practice. I don't think anybody really has any argument with that. But in this specific case, the vice chair takes the duties, but not the title. And that's on there for any reason. That could be anything from they have to hand off the gavel because of a conflict of interest for an election. They need to go walk the dog because without taking a recess. There's lots of different reasons for it to happen. That's the design, the structure behind this. But the point of it is that if it was meant that if the bylaw is intended to say, and the words that are in there are there for a reason, that's part of Robert's construction on bylaws, is in that chapter. If the wording was specific that the chair vice chair automatically becomes chair upon the chair being vacant, then it would be in there. It's never been in there in the entire time the party's been here. The lack of those words have a purpose, and that the idea was the vice chair fills in until they get a new chair, and that's always been the case back to 74. Going on to Roberts, though, okay, there's a couple of citations that weren't mentioned in the opinion that was given to Mr. Melman. 4711, subsection 1, page 429, if you're following along in your copy at home, specifically refers to the position of chair, but not the title being taken by the vice chair. Quote, if the president for any reason vacates the chair or is absent, the vice chair takes the chair. Again, it doesn't say he becomes the chair. He just takes the duties on. 4713, two sections later on 431, talks about an invited temporary presiding officer. Okay, they have the gavel. They have some of the duties of the position of chair. Are they the chair? No, they're not. Okay, because let's face it, they're not the elected officer. They're just filling in for something. Okay, 4723 says that the president vacates when for any reason the president vacates the chair, and it cites 4329, 4711, and 6212-14. The vice president serves in his stead, not in his place. Serving in his stead, courtesy of vocabulary.com, means doing their job for them while they're not there as a substitute. That's not assuming the title. They're just filling in. They're the substitute teacher. They're the fill-in umpire. They don't assume the title. They're just doing the job. 4728, the one that you guys have cited regarding automatic ascension, says it has to expressly provide for the filling of the vacancy. Okay, expressly means explicit and clear. The bylaws do expressively and clearly say that. Okay, but it's just in pieces. One piece is in Article 6, Section 1 about who's an officer, and then the other piece about about appointing for those vacancies in those positions is Articles 6, Section 8, and Article 7, Section 7. There's no requirement that it has to all be in one place, but it is there. So that's part of the problem there. The other thing is in that same section, the italicized office of the president, which is emphasis throughout Roberts. Roberts doesn't underline anything in the book, which is another way of using emphasis. So they're using emphasis here as a term of art, but that doesn't make it a requirement. And the problem there is that, again, it's already addressed by our bylaws. So the last piece of it, 5632, which is what you guys quoted, okay? It basically says that the bylaws are assigned as the method of filling the vacancy in the specific case of the presidency. The vice president automatically becomes president for the remainder of the term. Well, the bylaws do cover that because the methodology is appointment by the LNC. I think nobody disputes that. If the LNC appoints a replacement, it's for a vacancy. It's listed twice. Specific case does not mean, though, and this is where I think the misinterpretation is happening. Specific does not mean exclusive. It doesn't mean only the case of the chair. Specific just means clearly identified, and it is. But it's not exclusive. And that, I think, is the key misinterpretation of this whole thing, is that idea of saying it's specific it only has to be for that case, but it's included as part of the other cases. It is specific, but it's more than that, and it's not just isolated to that. The other piece about it is that, yes, the method has to be prescribed, how to do it in particular. But the other method means, other than the bylaws, well, it's in the bylaws. So it would fall to a special order or a standing rule, which I'll defer to Caryn Ann on that one. I don't know if we have one for that or not. She's shaking her head no over here, so okay. But again, this lazy idea of specific not being exclusive. It's not. They're different terms. And I think that's where the misinterpretation is coming. Is that if the bylaws were to say only in the case of the chair, the vice chair becomes that, instead of having a vacancy appointed, that would cover the case. But it doesn't do that because it includes it in the broader picture of all the officers. I don't think specific means exclusive here, and the terminology doesn't match up. I think that's where the problems are happening.
Let me respond to two or three things. And that was very good. Although you conveniently left out a key part of the citation in Roberts.
Which one?
And I'll come back to that 5623.
Okay.
5632.
Okay.
I'll come back to that in a minute.
One second.
Let
me find it. 5623.
Well, I'm going to 5632.
32. Okay. Hang on. Let me get there so I can follow along.
But I'm not going to talk about that just yet. I'll come back to that. Well, okay. We can start with it. Go. Okay.
You're driving. Go. I just got the book here.
Okay. Let's see. All right. I'm going to read the entire paragraph. It's one paragraph. The method of filling vacancies may be provided for. That's in the bylaws. This is talking about provisions that should be in the bylaws. Mm-hmm. Unless the bylaws clearly provide otherwise, notice of filling a vacancy in office must always be given to the members of the body that will elect the person to fill it. If the bylaws are silent as to the method of filling a vacancy in the specific case of presidency, the vice president or first vice president automatically becomes president for the remainder of the term, and the vacancy to be filled arises in the vice presidency or in the lowest ranking vice president. Then here's the key. Here's what you left out. If another method of filling a vacancy in the presidency is desired, it must be prescribed and specified as applying to the office of president in particular. That's the problem. The LP bylaws don't refer to filling a vacancy in the office of the president. In particular, they just refer to filling vacancies in any of the among the four officers in the officers. And that's the key. And some of these provisions in Robert's Rules of Order are actually italicized for emphasis, to put emphasis on the importance that the bylaws have to refer specifically to a vacancy in the office of the president. Now, I want to respond just kind of briefly to the other comments you made about the other provisions in Robert's Rules about the vice president filling in the absence of the president, etc. All of those provisions are to deal with the temporary absence of the president, all of them. When the president has to go to the bathroom, or he's absent from the meeting, or perhaps he wants to participate in debate, so he has turned the gavel over to the vice president, or he may be on vacation. That's what or he may be sick or disabled in the hospital. That's what all of those provisions apply to. They have nothing to do with filling a vacancy in the office of president. They just have to do with either the president being absent or unable to perform his duties, such as being illness, or when the president has turned the chair over to the vice president. So, but the bottom line is that again, in my view, there's not really a conflict between the LP bylaws and Roberts. Roberts says very plainly the LP can provide for whatever method of filling a vacancy in the office of president it wants to, but it's got to use certain language to do so, and it doesn't use that language. That's the problem, and that's why every credentialed parliamentarian, and I'm guessing that's 15 of us, at least maybe 20, all uniformly have taken the same position, that in this case, with your language and your bylaws, or similar language and other bylaws, if you go to the Robert's Rules discussion forum and do a search, which I've done, have found 10 or 15 threads right on point, some of the language just almost identical to the LP language. Every parliamentarian who has responded has said, in that case, it's not specific as to the president, so the vice president automatically becomes president. So that's the issue, and of course, and that was Ken Melman's position, and he had written opinions from 2 or 3 others. He had verbal opinions from 2 or 3 others. He has a verbal opinion from another credentialed parliamentarian whose name I'm not aware of. He has not told me who that was, but that he did get still another one by phone. So that's probably about 20 of us who all take the same position, and his position. He does not want to be chair. He asked the LNC to overrule his ruling, which they did at his request.
Yeah,
and,
no, it's been the LNC, and you guys know my feelings on this. You don't overrule correct opinions because you don't like the outcome. I think that's completely unethical. Even if Ken didn't want the chair, which he doesn't, he needed to assume it and resign and ask the LNC to reappoint him as vice chair. That's the only, to me, ethical way of doing it. But the LNC overruled his opinion, even though most of them admitted his opinion was right. And I think that's completely unethical.
But was there an actual appeal from the ruling of the chair? I didn't see that in the list.
Yeah.
It was on a meeting.
Oh, okay.
And
yes.
Out of respect for Ken, I abstained on that vote because no way was I going to overrule it. But in hindsight, I wish I voted yes. But it was out of friendship that I abstained. Joshua Smith was actually the only one with the backbone to say, nope, it was the correct ruling. Too bad you don't want to be chair. You are. But Caryn, I would never have overruled it.
When you said you wish you had voted yes, that means to sustain the ruling of the chair. Yeah.
Yes. I abstained from the vote, again, out of respect for Ken's wishes. I went a little soft there. But I never would have voted to overrule. I think it's absolutely absurd to overrule a correct ruling, as most of the LNC did. But then again, my opinion of the rest of the LNC right now is pretty well known. And I won't drag you into that, Richard. But yeah,
that's neither here nor there.
Yeah,
anyway, so.
I agree with Richard on this. Though, you know, I don't have any credentials to the point, but I would add
I don't either, but it never stopped me.
Yeah. But I would add also the other provisions you pointed in the bylaws really are parallel to the Roberts provisions about a temporary absence of the chair, not when the chair position is
But that's
unfilled.
not what it says.
It is actually what it says. It's in context, it's not dealing with a permanent.
For any reason. Doesn't say temporary, doesn't say permanent. It says any. Covers up both cases. That's the bylaws.
They're referring to temporary absences, basically. But by the way, people need to know this. This is an easy problem to fix. This can easily be fixed with a 2-word bylaw amendment at the next convention, and let the delegates decide. I know a lot of party officials think the LNC should be able to choose the chair. I'm not so sure the delegates would agree. I don't have a dog in that fight.
I actually think the delegates will agree, because to me, it's absolutely absurd to have the LNC choose the chair. And the fact that we're now reaching beyond people that didn't even run, that this LNC, which is whatever anyone's opinion is obviously very divided and very partisan at this point, is going to be choosing a chair. And I'll put my cards on the table for this, because to me, this is just a logical opinion. If the LNC is going to choose a chair, they should then pick the second choice of the delegates, which of course they probably don't want to do, which would be Joshua Smith. Otherwise, it should be Ken Molman, because he was actually voted on by the delegates. My opinion is Ken should take the chair and the vice chair should remain vacant, because this LNC is too partisan and too divided to responsibly pick another officer.
If the ruling of the chair, as Mr. Brown cites, so you guys don't agree with, then that is the correct approach to take.
Right.
Okay.
But
that's not what's happening.
They overruled it.
Right.
Right. But no, here, though, in our bylaws where it says, shall perform the duties of the chair in the event that the chair is for any reason unable to perform. Being unable presumes that the chair exists, that there is a person who is in the chair who is unable. So I don't think your for any reason means there is no chair. Because if there has to be a chair to be unable.
If the reason is they've resigned, they are therefore unable to do the duties by their own choice.
No, then they don't exist. There's not an inability.
Correct.
So, no, I just fundamentally disagree with your interpretation there. I think it's not correct. But that won't be the first time we disagreed. But I don't think there's a conflict here either. And I'd be the first to admit if our bylaws were sloppy, because they are sloppy in some areas.
Well, yeah, that wording's back from 1974. That wording is literally 50 years old.
Yeah, I don't think this is, though, particularly sloppy. There are some things I do think are.
Listen, guys, I enjoyed this. If you don't need me, I really need to run. If you need me to stick around,
that's perfect, Richard. We really, I think this was probably very helpful for people who weren't understanding the intricacies in and out.
This goes back to a fundamental problem, and this is, how do you structure your bylaws? You know, and I'm not criticizing Roberts. I think there's a contradiction in Roberts here because of the way they word it. I think that they're trying to say expressly means when they need to say that it needs to be said in this specific case of the chair versus other officers.
It does in the next sentence when it says in particular.
That's not what in particular means, though. Not when you're talking as a part of the larger group. Remember, I have a math degree. I specialize in set theory. Okay? But the point of it is that the wording of Roberts needs help on that also, because he didn't make it more clear as to what they're talking about here when they're using terms like expressly and in particular and so on. Definitions change over time. I had to look them up, and my definitions came out straight out of the Oxford Dictionary. Okay? I cite my sources.
I don't find it unclear.
When they say for any reason, any means any. Period. But any reason means they've stepped down, they died, they've quit, they got fired, you know. A meteorite fell on their heads, they got to take a leak, you know.
I agree with Caryn in there, because if the chair steps down, then there's the chair can't be absent. I mean,
It can't be unable
I agree
because
with
they
Caryn.
don't exist.
They were unable by their own
Yeah.
choice.
But
They made
again,
themselves unable.
this is an easy problem to fix.
In our bylaws, yeah.
In the bylaws, yes, at the convention, and 2 words either way will solve it. Add the words either including chair or excluding chair, and no matter which provision gets proposed, there's probably going to be a proposed amendment to change it. The delegates will ultimately decide whether they want the succession to be automatic or do they want the LNC to fill it. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Richard, though, there's something I got to put a bug in your ear about. I'm going to be speaking from memory of something I just looked at an hour ago, but one of the bylaws committee members is proposing ditching Roberts for some unspecified set of rules that the LNC gets to create. Talk about raping member rights.
We saw that both, and we're both like, what?
Not even substituting it for
changing the subject, but yes.
Not even substituting it for a different parliamentary authority, but for some unspecified set of rules created by the LNC. Talk about the fox guarding the hen house.
And wanting chicken dinner.
So
that I started to say that would be fun. No, it won't be fun.
No,
that'll be a disaster. But I don't know how the delegates would go for that, but it's up to the delegates.
I will argue on the floor against that with Rena with a passion and fire that Caryn Ann's never seen before.
Well, I think
I'll have the flaming pitchfork in hand.
I think some delegates will be really in favor of it until, and I'll make sure I have a substitute secretary if they haven't thrown me off then for that portion, because all I need to bring up is you guys who believe in due process. If the LNC was creating the rules, my ass would have been fried without due process. It was Roberts that saved my ass. So, and it will save y'all's ass too with an out of control LNC. You don't have the LNC creating their own rules. And I don't mind telling you what bylaws, you don't need to have an opinion, Richard, but it was fucking Dan Fishman that proposed this of all people. Shame on him. I regret my vote. I regret my vote. He wants to make a 4-year term for chair too. Oh my fucking God.
If you're gonna do a 4-year term for chair, you gotta stagger terms.
Yeah. All right, Richard.
Hold on, one last thing.
Right.
There is a simple solution, and it's a little more wordy than 4 words. Just do a 25th Amendment style proposal to say if the chair is gone by death, resignation, or removal, the vice chair becomes chair. Period. Simple, clear, end of problem.
Well, that's what I'm going to
support. I vote
support.
for that, by the way.
I support the vice chair automatically ascending because it's somebody the delegates voted for. Having the listen, I've seen how the sausage is made, and that sausage is nasty, and I do not want the LNC selecting a new chair. We're going to see what a disaster this is going to be. Yeah. Hopefully not.
All right. How do I get out of here? Do I?
Well, we can boot you out because we don't want you to get you into.
Richard, thanks for joining us. It's been a good discussion. I think we agree to disagree, but that's cool too. Okay, all mad respect to you.
All right, awesome. You have a good day.
Parliamentarians do disagree, although we all agree on this point. Well, all but one of us.
Well, remember, argument to consensus is a false argument, too.
Yeah.
All right, Richard. And I don't want to drag you into the internal stuff, so you have an awesome day.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Viva! Let's hear the opposition side. Like a stubborn donkey's bray. All opposed? You say nay. Opposed! Opposed! The motion carries anyway.